Welcome to Study the Solopreneur, a series where we learn about the rewards and challenges of those who've built a successful career for themselves while paving the way for others, like you, to do the same. I am your host, Dana Gore, and I'm glad to have you with us. So let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome to Study the Solopreneur, a series where we discuss the rewards and challenges of living your truth, freeing your mind, and being creative, of starting your own business, doing work you love. Today's guest and I go back a few years. I am super happy to have him on my show. Brent Jones is an author, a witty and talented one, if I may say so myself. He's written several books, including a series, and we will talk about that one soon enough. Now, Brent used to have a corporate job, but decided to become a solopreneur a few years ago. He blogged about freelancing and had his own show where he talked with other solopreneurs and freelancers about their experiences, along with tools and programs they use to succeed. Brent then realized his dream was to write fiction, so he took the plunge. I have personally read several of his books, and I really enjoyed them. So without further ado, let's get to it. Hello, Brent. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. How's everything going today?
Oh, so far so good. I was actually just in the midst of doing some reading here right before our call time. So happy to be chatting with you.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I know I might have known this, but other people don't. What type of work did you do before?
You mean prior to freelancing and that kind of thing?
Yes.
I spent most of my professional career in sales in one capacity or another. B2C, B2B, sales management and training. So always selling in one capacity or another. The corporate job you referenced in the introduction there, I was the director of business development with a tech startup in Toronto. So that was kind of the world I left behind when my wife and I bought our home here in Fort Erie and moved from Toronto. We decided that we'd like to start up our own business, and that was sort of the path down freelancing from there after moving.
Excellent. Excellent. So that's what made you leave? You just decided you and your wife wanted to start working together, which I think it's cool that you guys did work together, because just from the posts I had seen, it looked like you had fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of work in the beginning, but it was kind of nice to be in the trenches with somebody else who understood the challenges and the experiences. And in the beginning, when you're offering a combination of different sort of digital services, whether it's in the early stages, I know now my wife, Andrea, she's largely known for social media management and doing a lot of that type of work. In the beginning, we did a bit of everything, and we did it 24 hours a day. Anything, if it's a $20 writing job, we'll take it. Whatever it was to kind of move the needle on revenue. But it wasn't, we were open to a lot of different possibilities. I guess you could say a perfect storm of different circumstances happened all at once, because my wife moved to Toronto, to Canada from Atlanta. And when she moved here, she wasn't able to sort of find a job in a traditional sense, wasn't eligible to work until applying for and receiving permanent residency. And so I was really our sole income provider, and we knew we wanted to buy a home, but we didn't have like $3 million laying around to buy a house in Toronto. So we looked a little further out into Niagara region, and then we found the perfect home for us and for our dogs where we knew we'd be happy. But as far as professional career prospects, there wasn't really a whole lot nearby. So we thought, hey, this could be a really interesting time for us, buying our first home, kind of moving to a smaller town, about 30,000 people in Fort Erie. Maybe this would be a great time to really explore the opportunity to earn a full-time income online. And it was kind of fitting for us because and I don't know how much you know about our backstory, but Andrea and I met making YouTube videos. We were both like amateur YouTube content creators. We collaborated on making a few videos together. That's how we met, funny enough. So we thought that's kind of the perfect marriage, if you will, of all the circumstances, that if we can find a way using, harnessing the power of the internet to make a good living for ourselves, So we both just jumped in with, both feet at the time and thought, hey, either this is going to work or we're going to find something else to do after.
That is so cool. And yes, I did know a little bit of the backstory. And, guys, for you guys who are listening, just a little FYI, Brent's wife, Andrea, is actually my guest for February's Study the Solopreneur. It's Savvy Social Media Marketing with Andrea Jones. So you guys can check that out. And when you do, you'll get to hear kind of both sides of how this union came together. Right. I think it's cool personally. I think that's a great story.
We have a bizarre story because we met online, but not in like a plenty of fish kind of way, like it wasn't like we used a dating site. It was just sort of happenstance that we ended up, we ended up connecting that way. So
very organic.
Right. Yeah, it was
very natural and organic. I think that's a great story personally.
Yeah, it was very much a sign of the times, I guess, right? It's like, well, how'd you meet? We didn't have one of those bar stories or something, or a friend introduced us to a friend. It's like we made cheesy YouTube videos together. That's how we met.
Dude, I really would love to see one of those. I don't know if you still have them up, but if you do, you got to send me one.
Andrea still has some of hers up. I used to do a lot of jokes and rants and offensive humor and just stupid stuff that was on my mind. And I took it down to some point, right? Because at some point you look at it and go, yeah, this is not really consistent with what I'd want to call my personal brand at this point, right? So, I think I still have them all on my hard drive, but I took down my YouTube channel years ago. It's not there anymore.
I hear you. I would still totally love to watch one. I'll have to look through her channel.
Sure. Go for it.
Well, what made you decide to start blogging and specifically about freelancing? It seemed that you specialized in that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people thought I did specialize in that. I mean, that was always the core of the business. I mean, 99% of my revenue at the time. And let's just be clear on timelines here. I mean, we kind of dove into this business working at it together, but separately, I guess you'd say, towards the end of 2014. And I exited from our online business at the end of 2016. So it was really about 2 years that I spent in there doing some freelance writing, but the majority of it was doing social media management for small businesses. I took an interest in the blogging end of it, not so much in saying, like Andrea's approach of let me teach you social media. And I think if I'm being honest about it, it's because social media never really interested me all that much. I liked it as far as it being a tool. Even selling books now, it's a tool to me, right? I can connect with readers. I can sell and promote books. Social media is great for that. But playing online on social media all day, every day on behalf of small businesses, I mean, I found it draining, particularly during the 2016 US election. I mean, it was a depressing time, I think, to be on Facebook or Twitter, but I knew that I was doing something unique, where maybe it's not as unique now, 5-6 years later. We look at, there were a lot of people making a full-time living online, but when we kind of started to dip our toes into it, it was one of those things where people thought we were crazy. It was like, what are you going to do online? It's like, I don't know. I'm sure there's people who will pay us to do something. Let's find out. Let's get started and see where this goes. So we took a little bit of a gamble on it, I guess you'd say. But I knew that I part of the business model for winning business was to establish some degree of authority over what we were doing. Hey, I know what I'm talking about. So some of it was teaching, but a lot of the blogging, I wanted to take the focus down sort of another path of, hey, how could I help other potential freelancers or people who may want to start their own online service-based business? Could I help them to skip a bit of the learning curve that I had to go through, and share some of the progress I made along the way? And, even though I know a lot of people have had negative things to say about job sites and some of the things like, Fiverr and Upwork and these sorts of things, they were great sources of business for me. They honestly were, where something would start as a $5 gig, and then I'd end up taking on that same client at, $1,500 a month going forward. And that happened quite a number of times. And I thought, I really feel like there's a lot of misinformation here about where to find clients, about how to properly insulate yourself against, getting ripped off and these sorts of things. And then funny enough, the more that I ended up talking to other freelancers, and I believe you were a guest on my show one time as well. The more I talked to other people, the more that ended up leading to other business. Everybody knew somebody. So, I kind of steered away from me doing a lot of the teaching and more to, hey, how can we leverage, the kind of the shared wealth of knowledge that everybody in the space has, right? How can we learn from each other about where we source business, or where, how we work with difficult clients, even, that sort of thing. I mean, there's so much you can learn, just by taking that approach of every person that I meet, every person I connect with probably has something to teach me. And I think towards the end, when I sort of navigated out of that business, I think that's probably what I was best known for on my blog and my show, first called Better Blogging, then called Better Freelancing, was people looking at it as more of almost like a hub. It's like, how, here's a great place where we can connect and learn from a lot of different people in this space.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, I first noticed who you were because you had written a guest post on Adrian Smith's blog, which I missed that one too.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
That's how I found you to begin with. And then I submitted a post to your blog, and then, yeah, I definitely was on your show. And it's really, really cool that we got to meet that way. It's one of the rewards, in my opinion, of even getting into that kind of thing, because you meet people. And I wouldn't personally, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have known that 3 years later, I'd have you as a guest on my show. We'd still, I would have read a few of your books, and we'll talk about your books shortly. And that to me is part of the magic of doing this kind of thing. You meet.
Well, it is. It speaks to the same story about how I met Andrea, right? It's like we live in this very strange time where we forge relationships with strangers that are thousands of miles away from us and maybe have lived completely different lives, but through, as you use the word, organic, through a very organic process, we end up connecting with so many interesting people online. And so we meet some crazy people online too, right? But we also meet some really interesting people along the way that we try to keep in touch with.
So true. I've met some other really great people. So
right.
Yeah. So okay, so that was all very rewarding, and I personally loved your blog, and I know that you helped a lot of people, and I know that you had a great community going on. So what made you take the leap then into becoming an author, especially a fiction author? You write fiction.
Yeah, I do write fiction. So I alluded that I wasn't really happy with the social media end of the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
I liked it for what it was. It was a tool that could potentially really help businesses, realize some great progress, depending what their objectives were, whether it was sales or engagement or brand building or whatever it was. But I've never really loved the social experience, I guess, if we could call it that. And so I knew, kind of a couple of years into it, I remember talking with Andrea and saying, we built this great business together. I'm really proud of everything that we've done. I'm just not happy doing it. I mean, I'm so glad that we got to this point, but she was still very passionate about it. And I could tell that there were days where my negativity was dragging her down, right? Where it's like, she wants to put her best foot forward and deliver value to her clients. And I'm like, to me, it was like pulling teeth every day, like doing this kind of work. And to the outside, it probably seemed crazy. It's like, so you've got this great work at home lifestyle. You've got this, positive income. I mean, you've got people online that follow you and respect what you're, and to me, it was like, none of that stuff was fulfilling enough to justify it. So I told Andrea, like, I'd really like to exit the business. I mean, if you need to hire more bodies to kind of fill in for me and take over sort of my client load, I mean, that's fine. I mean, let's make this transition as smooth as possible for you, for our clients, for everybody else. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. I thought about a whole bunch of different, just silly stuff. I mean, for a moment, I entertained being like a private investigator. I'm like, that's kind of a cool job, right? Like, follow people around and take pictures of them and stuff. I watch too much TV, I guess. But anyway, I was like, I can't sit still like for that long. It's just never going to happen. So anyway, I toyed with a bunch of different ideas, but ever since I was a kid, I was always kind of writing or doing something in a creative capacity one way or another. I thought, I've always wanted to write fiction. I've always wanted to do that. I always wanted to write a novel. And so I said that to Andrea. I'm like, I'd really, if it's okay with you, I'd like to take some time here to write a book. And one book turned into 2 books and short stories and a series of novellas and a whole bunch of stuff later. That was the thing that I really wanted to do. And we were in a position where I figured I had the good fortune that we were in a position where I could do that. I could take some time. And I remember saying to Andrea, it's like, this is not a commitment that I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life. I get bored of things sometimes. I may want to move on and try something else down the road, but I'd really like to give this a fair shot and see, hey, is there even some potential that I could earn a regular income through writing fiction? So that's where it started. It was kind of a several month process into saying, what do I want to do next? And I thought, life can be so unpredictable sometimes. If I've got an opportunity right now to do something that I would largely consider a passion project that I've always wanted to do, I think I'd be crazy not to do it. And so I started working on my first novel fall of 2016, and then it was kind of, fully edited, published, ready to go by early 2017.
Yeah. And, folks, I just want to let you guys know I've read most of Brent's books. The first book that he's talking about is the 15th of June. And I read that right when it came out. And I have to tell you, you would not have known that this was an author's debut book. It was so well written. It's a story of a young man who has basically kind of been bumble tripping throughout his life, experiencing pain, kind of messing things up. And he sort of comes into himself throughout the novel and kind of wakes up and realizes how he's been living. And, I'll leave it at that. I don't know if I'm doing it justice, but that's pretty much what I took from it.
No, my favorite thing about your delivery of the description was that it was confident. And I know you probably experience this sometimes as a writer when people ask you, what's your latest book about? And you know better than any human being on this planet what your latest book is about. But you kind of sit there like, how do I explain this, right? I thought you summarized it very, very well. So.
Oh, okay. Perfect. I think my favorite one, though, is Fender. And Fender was the next one. Only your second book. I loved it. I think any dog lover would probably love that book.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's another story about, a man going through a very, very rough time. And basically, it's like the relationship he has with his dog and his friends, and going through the grief of what happened in his life, and how he basically learns more about himself, learns more about his perspective of life and about love, and how he comes through it at the end, and the role that his dog plays in his life. And I loved that one. I thought it was fantastic. So, and yeah, you're welcome. I know you've written several short stories, and I've read those as well. I thought they were great. I really loved An Honest Day's Work. And yeah, that was a great one. And then you started the series of novellas, the Afton Morrison series. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what made you decide to write a series? What gave you this subject matter? What inspired you?
Oh gosh. Okay. This might be a long answer. So I don't know if we're on a time limit here or not, but I'd written Fender in the 15th of June, and I was happy with those. I mean, from my first two novels, and I got to work with a great editor on both of them, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. My thought going into writing fiction was like, all right, worst thing that's going to happen here, if I decide to go the route of being self-published, it means, as you know, I pay for my own editor, my own cover designers, I do my own marketing, I do all, I'm happy to do all that. I figure worst case scenario is I'll write and publish a book and nobody's going to read it, or they will read it and they hate it. Those are the worst two things that could happen, and I can live with both of those. So let's give it a try. Overall, the feedback was pretty good, and as on those first two novels, and the first couple of short stories there that I published. You mentioned An Honest Day's Work as well as the matchbook, but a lot of my writing had largely revolved around, I guess, some very heavy topics, right? Death and grief, and sort of this process of finding yourself and moving on through life, and I thought, it's great. It's great material, especially if you want to write a sort of character-driven story. But if I'm being realistic about looking at the journey of being a self-published author from the marketing end, if you look at like kind of best-selling genres, stuff that people read, if we call them contemporary dramas or literary fiction, doesn't tend to show up very high, on the bestsellers list. It can in certain circumstances for sure, but a lot of times people are much more drawn to action, thriller, suspense, romance, whatever. I'm not a fan of self-published and indie authors that try to sort of chase the market. Like, the big thing right now is, let's say for argument's sake, cowboy, vampire, romance, dystopian novels or whatever. I mean, there are people who will try to write what they think people are going to buy, but I thought I'd really like to try writing in a genre that's a little more plot driven, that's a little more that moves a little quicker, maybe is a little more action oriented. I would really like to publish in a series for a couple of reasons. Again, one, it's great from a marketing perspective that if somebody likes book one, they may choose to buy books 2, 3, and 4, but also hedging bets a little bit. Because again, as an indie author, I'm relatively unknown. There aren't a lot of people who are familiar with my work. If you added it all up combined, I've got probably a few thousand we'll say followers or readers online between my mailing list and social media and everything else. And I thought, it's hard to take a really long book, let's say, or like a really thorough, Stephen King rainforest style publication here, and ask, hey, are you willing to spend 10, 12, 15, $20 on my book, even though you don't know me and you don't know if you're going to like my writing? And so I thought, if I could break up something into like a smaller series and maybe offer the first one for free, it would introduce me to a whole market of people that might be willing to check out the first book and then decide if they'd like to keep going. Or I think when the first book in the Afton Morrison series came out, I think I priced it at 99 cents, right? So it was a pretty low risk if you'd like to check it out. And that strategy proved to be fairly successful. I mean, people who read the first book either purchased the complete series bundle or continued with books 2, 3, and 4 from there. But the other part of the question was kind of what's it all about, where the idea come from. So starting with book one with Go Home Afton. Afton Morrison is a 26-year-old children's librarian in a fictitious Midwestern town I created called Wakefield. So small town children's librarian by day and kind of homicidal maniac by night. She's had these urges since she was a teenager to commit violent acts and to murder people, and she's plotting her first murder here, a sexual predator that has sort of eluded police. And of course, nothing's ever quite as simple as it seems. She puts in plan what she thinks is the perfect, I guess you say the perfect plan, the perfect steps to kill this guy in cold blood without getting caught. And of course, nothing is ever quite as simple as it seems. And that's where the story begins. So that first book, Go Home Afton, is free everywhere ebooks are sold, for any of your listeners who might like to check it out. As far as where the idea came from, I talked about this a little bit in the afterword of the book. Andrea and I will often watch Forensic Files before we go to bed at night. And I know that sounds morbid, but it's actually just because the show is so incredibly boring. Like I'm sure you've seen an episode or two of Forensic Files.
I used to watch it like
right.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was on like a long time ago, right? But it was one of those shows in the early days of where forensic science TV shows started becoming really interesting. And so anyway, I was watching it one night. I was noticing how they always give so much praise to forensics. Like it's so wonderful that, we can match fingerprints and DNA and clothing fibers and hair strands and all this kind of stuff. And so I started thinking, forensic evidence isn't a whole lot of good if you don't know who to match it to, right? So if somebody wanted to pull off a murder, like just for the sake of killing somebody without getting caught, how would they do it? And the answer I came up with was you'd have to have no motive. You'd have to have no reason for doing it. If somebody picked their target completely at random and killed them in cold blood, and they were meticulous, let's say they even did leave behind some forensic evidence, police would have no idea who to match it to. You'd never be able to solve this crime. When you watch Forensic Files, you can always bet in the first 2 minutes, it's like, oh, the husband did it. For sure, the husband did it every time. Or it'll be somebody like, I took out a life insurance policy on this person, and then the next day they ended up dead. And it's like, geez, I wonder who did it. So I started thinking, it'd be really cool to write a story about a serial killer in a small town who was just like cold enough to pick people that he had no connection to, no known affiliations with, and make a game out of it of like, how long could I stay ahead of the police? And then the more I thought about that idea, I thought, it'd be way more interesting if I picked a person who you would never, ever guess, would never suspect of committing a violent act. And that's where I thought, instead of making my murderer a him, let's make this a young woman. I mean, male serial killers outnumber their female counterparts 9 to 1. I don't know if you know a lot of children's librarians yourself, but they tend to be very unassuming, very kind, good-natured people. And I thought, that'd be such a cool story, like works with children by day, hunts and kills bad guys by night. So that was kind of the origin story of Afton Morrison. Like I started with this idea of this very quirky character that likes classical music and romantic comedies, and she's got a pet goldfish named Twinkie, and she wears ballet flats and has this sort of spiky shoulder length black hair and stuff. And I had this whole image in mind, and I thought this is going to be a really interesting character. And then there's, of course, as you know, a lot of twists and turns throughout the four novellas that make up the complete series. So I feel like I just talked for a long time, but I hope that answered a lot of your questions in one shot.
No, it did. I wanted to ask you, what rewards and challenges do you experience as an author?
I always think it's really cool when I connect with a reader who, for whatever reason, whatever place they're in their life, they end up reading something that I wrote and feel compelled to reach out. Normally it's positive. Very few people reach out and be like, you suck, I hate you. I hated your book. Most people reach out because they're like, I read it and I really connected with it on some level. I had a woman email me the other night who said her name was Afton. And she said like, hey, I found your book. And I've never found a book where the character's name was Afton before. So I thought I'd check it out. And I thought that was neat. A lot of the human experiences are very, very rewarding. I think the challenging parts as a writer are the same challenges that a lot of writers have, which, sometimes that lingering sense of self-doubt. Am I good enough? Is it good enough? Does anybody actually want to read this? Does anybody care? As you know, from writing nonfiction as well, you spend a lot of time almost in isolation while you're writing and creating these characters and their lives and the world around them. Just hoping that somebody else can connect to what you've created. It's almost like, you write, but what you're really doing is you're putting thoughts and images into somebody else's head, right? And that's a very powerful experience. So you're writing every time, you're writing all the time with your intended reader in mind. And that can lead to a lot of, obviously a lot of rewarding experiences when you do really connect with that reader and they really did get what you were trying to put in their head. And it can also be a very terrifying experience. And, it can lead to a lot of anxiety at times too, depending, right?
Sure. What new books or projects do you have on the horizon?
So I am working on a novel right now, but I don't want it to be like a standalone novel, truer to sort of my roots, not in this sort of action suspense thriller genre, but more of the, I guess you'd call it like a contemporary drama. I don't really want to say more than that about it right now, though, because it's still in kind of the early stages, and anything can happen in the writing process, right? So, but I'm hoping. I published a new short story and just made it for free for everybody on my website called Imperfect. I published that back in January, I believe.
I read it.
Yeah, you did. That's right. I think I remember because you commented on it. As far as the novel goes and some of the other short stories and things I have in the works, I'm going to stay a bit tight-lipped about it right now, but I'm hoping to have something more substantial to announce but before the end of the year.
All right. Well, I know I'll be one of the first to find out when there's more to say. But no, Imperfect actually was great. And obviously, folks, I'm going to leave the links to all of Brent's work, in the description box in this video and in the blog post as well. His Amazon authors page and his website and even the Goodreads page. Yeah. What advice, if any, would you give to people who either want to start, even if it's a freelancing solopreneur career or, a writing career?
Oh gosh. I mean, let me start with a really simple one specifically for writers. And maybe this is just fresh on my mind because last week a local high school hosted me in collaboration with the library where I spoke to grade 9 and 10 students about creative writing. And the biggest is funny, like, because I pulled the room, there were groups of maybe 20, 30 students at a time. Like, how many of you love creative writing, whether it's, stories, poetry, lyrics, whatever type of creative writing you like doing. How many of you like it? You could tell like some of the kids wanted to put their hands up. But they didn't, it was almost like a High School Musical moment, right? They're like, oh, I don't want the other kids to think I'm a loser, right? So I'm going to keep my hand down. But for a lot of them that did, the biggest fear they had is like, what if my writing sucks? What if people hate it? What if it's no good? Like, I'm like, I got news for you. Probably some of your first writing is going to suck. Like, it's just the way it goes. I mean, I appreciate your kind words about the 15th of June, but there's been more than once I've thought about it in the years since I've published that book. I think if I rewrote that book today, I could make it so much stronger than I did the first time. And that just might be a pet project of mine one day. You know, like maybe I will rewrite the 15th of June revisited or something along those lines. But my advice for anybody wanting to write, to do creative writing, is just write it, just publish it. I mean, again, the worst downside is either people won't like it, or in all likelihood, as a self-published author, you're going to find out a lot of people aren't going to hear about it in the first place. So, I mean, you're not, I think we overestimate the downside to pursuing our passions sometimes. For entrepreneurs, solopreneurs in general, people that want to work for themselves, my advice might follow a similar vein, actually, is that the best thing you can do is put yourself out there and give it a try, and be willing to take the work that nobody else will. That was one of our keys to success in the early stages. I mean, I keep up with some of the people that I connected with in the freelance world years ago, and I still talk to them now, and they're still struggling and having the same issues they did back then. They went out of the gates assuming they were worth a lot more than they really are. My attitude with freelance work was always like, look, if I'm making zero, I'm worth zero. People have this belief when they go into freelancing that I should get paid what I'm worth. It's like, that's true once you have the credentials and the experience and the client load to be able to back that and support that. But if you're just starting, don't get too cocky too quickly. I mean, I'd rather, you know, they say like, well, one in the hand's better than two in the bush, or however the saying goes. I mean, I was willing to take all the jobs, the good jobs, the bad jobs, the great clients, the nightmare clients. It didn't matter. In the early days, it was like, let's just get something going. And then, you know, once I've got a little bit more stability, a bit of regular income here, I can start to be more choosy about who I want to work with and what type of work I want to do. So there is a lot of work out there, and there's a lot of money to be made, and there are lots of people who are ready to pay you to do good work for them, right? But some of it is like, you got to start somewhere. I always remember the example of when I first started in that business, and I created a Facebook page for my services. And, you know, you create a brand new Facebook page and you invite your friends to like it, and you've got what, like 50 likes on your Facebook page, 100 likes on your Facebook page. So here I am pitching a client about, I'd like to take over doing your social media management for you. And they go look at my Facebook page when I'm starting out, and they're like, you have 100 Facebook likes. I mean, why the hell would I hire you to do this for me? Like, well, you know, I mean, I'm starting somewhere. And of course, as you know, that grew over a couple of years into many thousands of Facebook page likes. But I only provide that as an example to say that everybody starts somewhere. And if you're thinking of starting your own online business, and you think that you should be paid six figures because you showed up, you know, it's just not how it works, right? You got to start somewhere and work up from there.
Yeah, that's actually great advice. You know, when I had first started writing, I wrote for free. I mean,
right.
Yeah, I wrote for free, and I did it until I had a portfolio.
Right. Basically. Yeah, and it's great when you do guest posts too, because people are always looking for content. So if you want to be a freelance writer, for example, how about I write an article for you? How about I write a post for you? I'll do it for free. And now you've got this online. You've got a byline pointed back to your website. You got credit for it, right? It gives you a chance to showcase your writing. But I'm amazed at how many people I've talked to throughout, you know, really since I went down this path in 2014. Like, people I've talked to that are just not willing to do it. Like, I would never, ever do work for free. It's like, well, I got news for you. That's what being self-employed is. A lot of times it is doing the work for free so that you can put yourself in a position to do the work you get paid for. Like that old saying about entrepreneurs are the only people that'll work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours a week, right? Yeah, I mean, you got to put in the time and pay your dues. No matter how great you think you are or how qualified you look on paper, it takes time to build a reputation and build trust online, and you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the guest posting, wow. To me, it's even more than just getting the work out there, even though that is so great. I mean, you show up search terms and everything, but you and I are talking right now because of guest posting.
Right.
My January guest, Corey Ramos, and I know you know who she is.
Yeah, I know Corey.
Yeah, we met because of guest posting. I think she commented on one of my guest posts on Adrian's blog. Right. And we ended up meeting that way. And my guest in June is, you know, she guest posted for me. I guest posted for her. We met because I guest posted for somebody else.
Right.
You know, and that was 5 years ago. So, oh yeah, there's some magical things that can happen, when you write for other people's blogs.
I
So,
mean, maybe that's just the salesperson in me from, having spent, the better part of, well, more than a decade really in sales one way or another is, look, everybody knows somebody, right?
mhm.
That no sale call or whatever that you think you just wasted your time on, you don't know who that person knows, right? And I've always thought of sales, business building, hell, even being a self-published author. I mean, it's all a contact sport. The more people you contact, the more success you're going to have. I mean, what most businesses and fiction and other entertainment have in common is they're all people-driven businesses, right? I mean, I guess if you wanted to boil it down, every business is a person-driven business. But I think sometimes we forget that it's like, we got to build some connections and some like and trust with other human beings if we want to succeed. Because no man or no woman is an island all on their own. We're all connected to other people somehow. So somebody that would scoff at doing guest posting or something like that, it's like, I'm going to guess that you're probably, I know it sounds like a facetious thing to say without knowing the circumstances, but let me rephrase that. I would put my money every time on the person that's making an active effort to try to build connections with real people. I mean, no matter what endeavor that person is pursuing, I can almost guarantee they'll be more successful at it for being connected with more people.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I kind of put that into the butterfly effect. You take
Yeah.
action and you really just don't know how it's going to affect other things in other ways. And for me personally, I love the relationships that I've met with, that I've made with people.
Right.
But none of them really came from this place of what can they do for me? And that's
Right.
probably why I don't have a ton of them. I only have
Sure.
I only have a few of them, but the ones that I've made are organic and they're natural and they're, the kinds of people I can sit and just have any conversation with without there needing to be some kind of an arrangement or an exchange of any kind, you know.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, just taking an interest in people for the sake of being interested in people, right? And maybe that's another just a little nugget for people that want to write fiction as well, is that it's great to connect with not only a lot of different people but different types of people, and and the more traveling you can do, I mean, the more you're exposed to human behavior, the better you're, or I guess the bigger range of it that you're able to observe, the more in depth you're able to think about your own characters and your own creations as well.
yeah, yeah, true. Brent, we have actually gone beyond the time, even though I said it for a while. But that's what happens when when you enjoy the conversation. You gave some excellent answers, and I really, really enjoyed having you as my guest. Where can people find you?
So I am at Author Brent J on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Follow me and I'll follow you back. My website is authorbrentjones.com. And everything we've talked about pretty well is linked to on there. I mean, if somebody wants to check out the Afton Morrison series, and as I mentioned, book one is free, you can actually go to aftonmorrison.com, and that'll redirect you basically to the series page on Amazon. So you can get book one for free and then purchase books 2, 3, or 4 later. Last fall, the complete series bundle, I guess if you want to call it, just aptly titled the Afton Morrison series, was released not only as one giant ebook, but also as one giant paperback and an audiobook on Audible that's 21 hours long. So if any of your listeners are feeling brave and they're like, I think I'm going to like this whole series because badass female, vigilante, disturbed, I mean, that sounds good to me. Print, ebook, or paperback, they're all available on Amazon and other sites as well. But links to everything that I'm responsible for creating are all at authorbrentjones.com.
Excellent. Yeah, and like I said, folks, I'm going to have all of that information in the video and in the blog post. Brent, it has been a pleasure. I have enjoyed our conversation, and
Thank you.
just excited to be able to bring you and your story, to other people's awareness. So
I appreciate that. And remember, as an author sitting in isolation for a lot of the time, I mean, I'm always happy to talk to another human being in the middle of the day. So thank you for making time to talk with me as well.
Oh, my pleasure. Guys, thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this video, this interview, actually, this is an audio. This is probably the first one in the series that's an audio, and I'm kind of liking it. So we may end up doing more audios from here on out. But either way, I would encourage you to share this with your friends, anybody that you know who wants to become a solopreneur, maybe even become a fiction writer. This will inspire them. Share this with your friends, loved ones, and frenemies alike. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button. There will be more where this came from. Thank you, guys, and until next time, take care. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Study the Solopreneur. I hope this inspired you to take action to create a rewarding and successful career for yourself, doing work you love. I am your host, Dana Gore, and if you enjoyed this conversation, I invite you to visit my website at IamMyImagination.com. Live your truth, free your mind, be creative. Until next time, take care.